One is the nature of their peer group, okay? Two was the quality and the quantity of student interactions with faculty outside the classroom. So that connection that students feel with a faculty member independent of what they're doing in the classroom. And then of course their level of student involvement and the amount of time that they've spent studying. And we feel that certainly undergraduate research brings a lot to this and can help facilitate this and make a very, very successful experience for students here at Weber State. Back in 2004, I believe it was, the Office of Undergraduate Research was created, and we assembled a group of faculty across campus to help us define what we meant by undergraduate research. And this is the definition that we use. Undergraduate research includes scholarly and creative activities conducted by undergraduate students in collaboration with mentors. So for us, the student has to come to us with a mentor before we can even begin to work with them. For the purposes of examining, creating, or sharing knowledge or works in ways consistent with practices within the discipline. So that's the definition that we use, and so you can imagine then what it is within your discipline that would apply to this. There are a number of components that we think are critical for undergraduate research, and I'm going to put them all up here. First of all is an inquiry or an investigation of a question or a problem. Second, the student has to use the methodology that's appropriate to their particular discipline. That's pretty self-evident. There has to be some sort of relevant intellectual contribution. So the student isn't necessarily just recreating a canned experiment or some report or something like that. So there has to be some sort of intellectual contribution the student is applying to that field of study. And then lastly, the student is mentored by faculty. We also, in addition to faculty, have had in the past staff that work with students. Occasionally, individuals that are researchers outside of the institution have mentored our students, but it all kind of depends upon the type of project and how comfortable the student and whatnot is with that. We think there are a number of benefits associated with undergraduate research. For example, we have the application of classroom knowledge. We think that it's going to help the student build confidence, providing direction for their field of study, perhaps. A lot of students haven't even considered the idea that research is certainly a potential for them to explore as a career. We find that students that are engaged in undergraduate research are much more motivated students as well. They get an enhanced skill set. A number of studies have demonstrated that their critical thinking and problem solving skills are much more enhanced after participating in undergraduate research. Reveals and encourages independence, integrity, perseverance, ingenuity, imagination, and they also become members of their discipline. It's really interesting once the student has finished their research and is actually disseminating their work, how connected they feel to the discipline itself and how that they feel like they've made a contribution to their field of study. And then also increased marketability to graduate school and employment. These attributes of undergraduate research were published many years ago actually now, but in a science article in 2007. Here at Weber, we provide a number of opportunities for students to assist them in pursuing undergraduate research. These mostly are in the forms of funding, and so we'll go through a couple of these here. But we also have some other ways in which we support students and faculty. The main thing that we do is to provide funding support for a student to actually engage in the project. And that's what we call our research grants. Those are semester or long-term grants. They differ these two types of research grants differ in primarily whether or not the student is engaged in a project in a class environment, so that would be a semester type experience, or is it a longer term project, something that the student isn't getting course credit for but is doing it outside of classroom activities, and that would be a long-term project. We have a number of students that engage in those type of programs, particularly over the summer, for example. We will fund in these different types of grants research supplies, equipment. We will fund travel if it's necessary for the student to get to a field site or get to a location to collect data or to begin a project. And then if the student is engaged in a long-term project, we will actually support the student through a scholarship. So they can get up to $2,500 to pay themselves to engage in the research. And our student population, we feel, that's a very important thing that we have associated with these grants, because many of our students, as you know, are working full-time with families trying to support their education. So if we can actually reduce the number of hours that they're putting into their job, having them engaged in undergraduate research, then we feel like we're doing a benefit for the students. These types of grants, we have 4 different funding rounds per year, 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring. And if you look on the opportunities list, you'll see the grant deadlines. And our first one is October 3rd. We have another one coming up November 14th. Those are for the fall semester. And then in the spring, we have February 6th and April 3rd. The award amount students can request for a long-term grant is up to $3,500. And like I said, of that, $2,500 can be a scholarship or a stipend for the student. The semester grant is up to $1,000, so they can get up to $1,000 for those. Once the student has completed the research, we don't feel that it's finished. We feel that the student has to actually go out and disseminate that research. And so it's a very important part that the student learn how to communicate within their discipline what they've learned. And so we will provide up to $1,000 for travel grants to go out and disseminate to conferences, symposia, those kinds of things. We think that if they can do that in a discipline-specific conference, that is superb. But we also will support students to go to, for example, national undergraduate research conferences and so forth. We don't have any deadlines for those dissemination awards because conferences are always coming up, and so you can turn in. We ask for a couple of weeks heads up on these, so you submit those in, and we can review them fairly quickly over those 2 weeks. And I will mention the funding for this travel awards comes through student fee money. And so we get some student fee money to help support our students to go out and disseminate. And they go all over the world. Our students we've sent all over. Yeah.
This, John, sorry I missed it, John. The 3,500. So the 2,500 scholarship. Is that part of it, or is that addition to the?
It's included in that 3,500.
So 1,000 towards.
Yeah. So the long-term grant has a total maximum award of 3,500, and the student can, within that 3,500, include up to 2,500 stipend.
And the long-term means a semester long minimum.
It has to be more than one single semester, so 2 semesters or a summer. Yeah.
So can a student apply for the grant only once? Like if it's for a year, if the student's working on it?
We've had students get multiple awards. We have had them, but we do require that they have completed their first one and that they've disseminated in some way. And so we've had a couple students that have just been gung-ho with research, and they've completed several projects over the course of their time here at Beacon. Some other ways in which we support undergraduate research, we host each year an annual undergraduate research symposium, and this is for students, whether or not they've received funding through our office, anywhere on campus, they're engaged in undergraduate research, creative or scholarly activities, they can disseminate, and it's held each year at, on the last Monday of March, so this year it'll be March 27th. We also have a student-led and published undergraduate research journal, so students that can disseminate their work in a written format can submit to Ergo, and we have a staff of students that work on that, as well as we have faculty reviewers that assist in reviewing articles that get submitted for Ergo. As I mentioned before, we do send students to undergraduate research specific conferences, and there are a number of those around. The two main ones that we have a lot of student support for is the Utah Conference on Undergraduate Research. Any student that wants to attend that can simply apply to our office and we will get them there. I cannot remember, I think this year it's at Utah State, but it moves around the state each year. So we will have a bus to go up, students can disseminate at those conferences. Pardon? Is it UVU? Okay. Thank you. There was a flyer that came out today and I forgot to look at that one as well. But anyway, the conference, it moves around the state and we will get the students there for them. It's a good opportunity as kind of a student's first experience into disseminating. And they will disseminate to other students, but it's a good dry run for them if they're going to be moving on, for example, to a professional conference. And it's also a great experience if that's all they're going to do, is to disseminate. And then we also do the National Conference on Undergraduate Research. That moves around the country. This year, I know where this one is. This is in Memphis. So this year it's in Memphis. It'll be, usually it's in the spring, usually in April. We don't have enough funds to send anybody that wants to go. So we ask students to apply first to us. So those deadlines are coming up. The travel grant to NCUR deadline is November 2nd. The conference is April 6th through the 8th of 2017. So students that want to go and get funding through our office apply first to us for money. We usually send, depending upon what the airfare is to these different locations, we usually send anywhere from 10 to 20 students, and then we also will send a couple of mentors as well to the conference. And that's a huge undergraduate research conference. Over 3,000 students will be presenting in every conceivable discipline that there is. So it's a really good opportunity. And then for faculty, there is a group called CUR, the Council for Undergraduate Research. And this is for faculty only. And it's an opportunity where you can get more information, you can become engaged in the idea or the concept of undergraduate research. They host a national conference every 2 years, and I don't have the dates. I don't know, do you know when the next one is?
June of
2017, this year? Because
well,
you
this
just
year-
had the business meeting, or
Huh?
was it? Oh, it was the national conference this year.
Yeah, it was together actually.
Okay.
So,
So it will be in 2018.
no, sorry. But yeah, biennial conference will be 2018, but the business meeting is every year.
Right. So faculty that are interested in that can certainly get information from myself. We have several CUR counselors on our campus. I think we have like 4 or 5 CUR counselors, which is pretty good. So those are the opportunities. We also provide some additional things that faculty can find useful. We have a large format printer in our office for printing posters. So if you have a student that is doing a research project with you, we will print their poster for free. And if you have been working with students and supporting undergraduate research, we will print your posters free too. So if you want to do that, you'll just need to contact our office and I'll give you our phone number. It's actually...
Are they laminated?
No, we don't laminate them, but sure you can find somewhere to
Yeah.
get them laminated, I don't know. Our phone extension is 8541. And Erin will be happy to help you get that figured out. She's our office manager. We also have laptops available for student research as well. They can check those all out. What I thought I would do now is, if you're interested, go through what we tell the students about writing a proposal for funding. Because this is a competitive process. We want our students to be successful. And if they start off on a bad footing, submitting a less than stellar proposal, they can get a bad taste in their mouth. So what we do is we have a workshop for the students that allows them to see what we can expect and to make sure that they've completed everything that is necessary for a proper review of the proposal. We have a limited amount of money every year to support research on campus. It varies depending upon the funding, but we generally have about $100,000. And we spread that out over those 4 different grant rounds. And so that's roughly about $25,000 for each grant round. We do carry things over, and the spring is the biggest, most competitive time period because students are getting their funding for the summer research, summer experiences. So it's a bit more competitive in the spring. The proposals are first gathered in our office. Students submit those electronically. And then we have a committee representing each of the different colleges. So we have faculty that sit on the committee from each of the different colleges. They receive the proposals, and they're given a week to review those proposals and rank them or score them. They're scored independent of one another. We receive then from the faculty those scores, and we rank the proposals from the best to the not so good, all right? Then we call a meeting together of all the faculty, and we come together and we start discussing proposals from the best to the worst. And so we may end up not getting to some proposals because we run out of funds. It's important that the student knows that process of how those grants are being evaluated, because they are going to be writing to a general but educated audience. Somebody in arts and humanities is going to be reading a project from social and behavioral sciences. Somebody from East is going to be reading an arts and humanities project. So it's important that the student know that they cannot be jargon laden in their text. They need to be very clear and define terms as they go through, because we can read proposals from other disciplines so long as we can understand what they're talking about. So the student has to know that, okay?
Question.
Yeah.
Do you have reviewers from every college?
We do. From each college, we have an individual who represents that particular college.
So they will read all proposals or just read
The seven members of the committee read every single proposal that's submitted.
I've read them all.
Yes. Yes. Supposedly. No, they do. They do. They do. They do. They do. We get their ranks. What college are you from?
Education.
Your representative is Rod Hansen. And I'll show you in a minute here, but on the signature page of the proposal, there is a spot for the student to have the representative from their college sign off on the proposal. So what we do is we ask the student to go to that person in your college and get feedback, initial feedback on the proposal. And if the student does that and follows the advice, then 9 times out of 10, that individual will be the advocate for that student on the committee. Nothing is worse than a student going to that faculty member, getting their feedback, and then not incorporating it into the proposal. That has happened numerous times, and it really makes faculty mad that they've spent all this time critiquing and trying to help the student, and when they don't take their advice, then of course, usually they don't get funded. So anyway, just advise your students that that's an important opportunity that they should take advantage of. So what we do then for the workshop is we go through these different components of the proposal, formulating it, composing it, revising it, and editing it. And we go through kind of a tip process for the students. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because you're all familiar with this kind of a process, but I want you to be aware of what we're telling your students. We want them to, of course, choose a good topic that they're going to be interested in and be motivated behind, because certainly if they're not going to be interested, then it's going to come across in their writing. Second, in this formulating stage, is for the student to do their preliminary research. And we require that they have a literature cited page and that they have cited works from previous related research. And we are pretty consistent on that. So they need to do that preliminary homework. A lot of students are kind of clueless about that hey, we have to do research first before we can start our research. But yeah, you have to go out and get that information to know where your piece is going to fit into the bigger picture. We ask the students also in the proposal to think about what the final outcome is going to be. What is the direction of the research? Because that needs to be conveyed to the reviewers in what is it we're expecting to see at the end? What is the end result going to look like? Okay. We want the students to go out and get ideas from others, and particularly work very, very closely with their faculty mentor. That's an important part of this learning process in grant writing, for example, is to trade back and forth, just like we did with our dissertations with our advisor. Trade back and forth drafts, go through, correct it, and give it back, give them advice, suggestions, and so forth. Then, of course, we offer students an opportunity to look at previous proposals that were funded. And that way they can get an idea of what the committee typically is looking for and how those things are put together. And so we have on our in our files successful grant proposals. Those students can get those online. They're from every different college, so there are representatives there for you. And of course, the student will need to spend a little bit of time thinking about how that would work with their particular project. We ask them, of course, to be very specific, and this comes in play when they're putting together their budgets, for example. They shouldn't be just guessing about cost associated with the project. They should try to be as close as they can to what those costs are going to be. That helps them in the long run, for sure. Being concise and organized is very, very important, obviously. As you can imagine, the faculty members reading all of these different proposals, the ones that are going to be standing out to them are the ones that are going to get to the point very, very quickly, look very neat, and are organized in a fashion that the person that's reading through that can quickly find what they're looking for in the proposal. Don't have to dig through all these words and so forth to find it. And then, of course, as I mentioned, write to the audience. Know that you have an educated audience out there, but it's not within their particular discipline. So they need to have a general but educated proposal. Nothing will kill the proposal quicker than major errors. So the students really need to make sure that they go back through those proposals and get them proofread, checking for grammatical, spelling errors, and so forth. And then, of course, making it look professional, very, very helpful, and trying not to get too cutesy with fancy fonts and colors and that kind of thing. Those were the 10 tips of getting funded. Then we quickly go through for students how not to get funded. And obviously these are kind of, obvious, but poorly written proposals, inadequately written, not written to your audience, a proposal written by the faculty member. That has happened before, unfortunately, and it's fairly evident when it does. So make sure that the student is using their words. We really want the student to work closely with you, but it's their words, their work, not yours. Okay. And then we also ask for a letter or a questionnaire at the end of the proposal by the faculty mentor. And we can tell when we have a faculty mentor who's not all that enthusiastic about the project. And so I tell the students, make sure that you're comfortable with your mentor and your mentor is comfortable with you, because this is not a good thing if you don't have a very enthusiastic mentor behind it. And I would give you the advice, don't waste the student's time. If you're not interested in doing this or in it 100%, then just tell the student that it's not going to work this semester or whatever, because it does take a lot of time for them to put these things together. Projects that aren't significant or making a contribution to their discipline, or those that are aren't feasible, not able to be done within the period of time they've suggested or developed. And then, of course, it's also evident sometimes that students are just trying to figure out a way to get somewhere to do a project, and so make sure it's not a holiday junket for the student, that they're trying to get their study abroad trip funded, and oh, by the way, let's just try and get a research project associated with it to do it. Okay, we want the project, the research project, to be the primary reason that the student has to go wherever they're going. Okay. Mistakes, assertion of proof or evidence, those kind of things are also important. So that's the quick rundown of what we talk about in the proposal writing workshop, and I'll throw up here in a second what the proposal format looks like. Here are the information for our office. We're located now in the Tracy Hall Science Building, while the library is being renovated. Once that's done, and they tell us by the end of December, we'll be back over in the library, we'll have our regular office back. But for now, we're in Tracy Hall, room 422. You can get Aaron at 8541, and our website there is weber.edu/OUR, and I put my email up there too for students to see. Aaron puts her phone number. So, all right, any questions before I get us over to what the proposal looks like?
What is the workshop, by the way, for the students?
We have several each semester. The next one coming up is the 14th of September. And then there's two in October, the 25th or the 26th. Those also can be done, if necessary, on a one-on-one basis. So Aaron will do that for some students if they can't make those workshops. And there's a URL on here. So if you go to our workshops section on our webpage, it'll list the location and the time for those. I wonder why that's not up there. It's showing on here. Interesting. Well, I will talk about it. So thank you.
in extended mode. So you can drag it from the left to the right and it should bring it over.
Drag what?
Whatever
PowerPoint?
we're gonna look at.
I just have a Word document.
Yeah, drag the Word document from the top all the way over, and it should go off your screen and onto. Maybe.
Sometimes they only allow PowerPoint slides to project, not the other files.
Well, sorry. Anyway, so I'll just go through what our proposal looks like. You can find this online. And we have, as you would expect, the first page is basically information for our office. So we have the names of students. We do support multiple student groups, or multiple students per project, so they can list all the different people that are involved in that. We have then signature blocks on that cover page. We require the faculty mentor sign off on it. We also require that the department chair signs off on it. And then I told you already, we asked for the research committee representative from your college. That information can also be found on our website too, the individuals that represent your college. We ask that you give the undergraduate research committee rep about 2 weeks ahead of the deadline to look at the proposal. Obviously, it's not going to take them that long, but we want time enough for the student to make changes after they've received those comments from the committee rep. The student can submit the project or the proposal to for funding without the rep's signature, but it doesn't look very good to the rest of the committee when they see that the rep hasn't had an opportunity to look at it. Oftentimes it tells us the student was just trying to rush to get it in and didn't have time to do that. So it doesn't look great, but we will accept it. And we have funded projects that haven't been reviewed. We then have a little section here also on the form that the student has to check whether or not the project is one in which requires a human subjects approval or animal care and use approval. If the project does, the student can submit it and it can be awarded fund or could be considered for funding without having the approval, but the money won't be released until we receive notification that that's been approved. Okay. So it's another opportunity to educate your student about working within your particular discipline and how things actually work. So that's just basic information on the cover page, the title of the project, those kind of things. We then have the budget section of the proposal. It's just a spreadsheet, and we have columns. The columns represent where their funding is coming from, and the rows are the different types of materials or supplies that they are requesting. So oftentimes students will work with a faculty member who has some funding from a grant, and so they can list that in one of the columns, or they may get some funding from your college or your department, they can list that. So we want to know the total amount that this project is going to cost, and then out of all that, how much are they asking from undergraduate research? It's really helpful for the committee to see, where this project falls within those kinds of sources, funding sources. It's not required by any means that students get additional types of funding for the project. So that's the page, and then we ask, we certainly want the student to be very, very careful about what they're requesting, making sure that they're checking prices and not just off the top of their head kind of estimating. Then the body of the proposal is broken up into sections. And on the proposal, we have written out exactly what we want from the student. Okay? The first section is titled the project description. And I'll just read you what we have written here. This is approximately 2 pages in length for the student. Okay? Identify the project question or purpose, goals, objectives, and outcome. Incorporate 3 appropriate references that relate to the body of the knowledge that is the focus of this project. Funded projects must be sufficiently significant and challenging so that it will enhance the student's intellectual and creative development, as well as make a contribution to the chosen field of study. Service learning projects can be funded so long as there is a research component, for example, community-based research projects. And then we ask the student, in addition to providing that information, to describe their role in the project. We know that there is a continuum of how students are involved in research. Either they are dependent on the faculty member, so the faculty member is just handing them the research question, they're telling them how to do this, and they're formulating everything for them, and the student is basically a research assistant. That is the one end of the continuum. But what we want is to see students move along there to the very end where it's an independent type of research experience, where the faculty mentor is the advisor, helping them learn the technique and then allowing the student to engage in that, for example, by themselves. So we want them to indicate where they fall along that continuum. We want the individuals to describe their previous training and experience that have prepared them to complete the project, and then describe the product that will result from the project. So a scholarly paper, an exhibit, a performance, those kinds of things. We have that then as the project description, maximum of about 2 pages in length. The next section for the student is a 1-page project methods and timeline, where they're going to describe the steps required to answer that question or get to that endpoint that was described above. And then the following page is the budget explanation. And here we want the student to justify the components that are listed in that project budget. If a student is requesting a stipend, the student needs to justify that in this section as well. They need to indicate how many hours they expect they will participate in the project, and that it'll probably, and if they do need a stipend or scholarship associated with that, they need to explain to the committee why it is necessary that they do that. We have many projects that are done here on campus, for example, that require large amounts of time, large blocks of time for students to engage in. And it's really impossible for them, unless they're independently wealthy, to invest in that amount of time outside of work and so forth. So they need to do that and certainly list any other kind of conflicts that they have, either their class and work schedules that are associated with that. Then we have a section of questions that the students have to answer. And these are things like, have you received funding before? Where do you anticipate, if this is part of a required course, please indicate what course it's for, attach a syllabus. What other sources of funding have you received or tried to receive? And then plans for the dissemination of the results of the project. And then the following page is the faculty recommendation form. And that's where the faculty member talks a little bit about the student and the project, whether it's a feasible project, one in which the student has a high degree of expectations for finishing and so forth. And then describe your role in the project. And that's it. That's the proposal.
John?
Yes?
Are classroom projects not given as much value as outside of class projects? project?
No, we've gone round and round about this, but the idea is, the reason they're only given $1,000 is because many of the classroom projects have, or should collect, or do collect, lab fees associated with it to support the research that's going on in the classroom. In addition, if there is such expectation within the class to do those kinds of research activities, undergraduate research can't be expected to fund all of that for every class. The other thing is that we don't allow for a stipend because the student is receiving course credit for that. And so we've kind of tried to separate that out. We do think, though, that there's very high value for students to engage in research inside the classroom. So that's why we have these sets of grants, and they're up to $1,000. Any other questions? Alrighty, well, we have our first funding round coming up, and these are generally the smallest stack of proposals. So if you do have a student that's ready to go, get them moving and submitting. Those are coming up. The first deadline is October 3rd and November 14th. So usually the fall is pretty light. But anyway, if you have any questions by any means, let me know. I'm happy to answer questions. Send me an email, call up the office, whatever, and chat.
Let's give John a big thank you.
You're welcome.